What is the kindest thing you've done or seen? When my wife gave birth to our firstborn, the woman she had shared a ward with while in the early stages of labor had a stillbirth. After giving birth, rather than spending time bonding with her newborn, my exhausted wife gave me our son and spent 3 hours comforting and consoling this woman. Something about the bond of mothers seemed to connect them. The woman and her husband have since become close family friends and had 2 beautiful children after this. They still credit the support we, mostly my wife, gave them in the period of time after the stillbirth, especially in those 3 hours, with helping them get through their grief. The kindest act I've ever seen. Done by the kindest person I've ever met. Edit. Wow. This really did blow up. Thanks for all the upvotes, awards, and kind comments. That means a lot. For all those asking, no, you cannot have my wife. Your wife is a keeper. You definitely should marry her. I was selling my bike when I was a teen for $30. Got a hit and set up a location. I ended up being greeted by 2 kids on a single bike, one on the pegs, and the kid with the bike bought his friend my bike so they could ride together. Now that is a bro right there. I love hearing stuff like this. Thanks for sharing. I'm epileptic. Once, during a school assembly, I had a seizure. It was pretty bad, too. When I woke up, the first people I saw were my English teacher, and she was smiling and telling me it would be okay, and my health teacher, who was apparently the first person to run and get me help. I was in a super emotional state after the seizure, and I began to cry and say I'm sorry. I was hushed by my teacher and helped down the bleachers by them. My health teacher, my English teacher, my choir director, and the school counselor all stayed by me until I got into the ambulance. My literature teacher also ended up sending me a very nice video of her and all of her family wishing me well. Another seizure I had, I was at a con, standing in line to get David Tennant's autograph. I was so excited that I had a seizure, and after I woke up I was wheeled back behind a curtain that was behind the booth. A moment later, David Tennant's agent came up to me and asked me what color pen I wanted. I was confused, but I said black. After he said that, he explained that David wanted to come back and make sure I was okay, which he did. The first thing he said to me was, "What are you doing falling down on me?" And he walked over and we had a full conversation. He asked my name and autographed the book I had brought for him too. I got a picture, a conversation, and an autograph from David Tennant. And this was big. I am a huge fangirl for him. All he wanted was to make sure I was okay. This is my favorite. I love David Tennant and really hoped he was as cool as he seems. One day after work I noticed an older lady struggling with her groceries at the bus stop. I offered to carry her bags and ended up walking with her to her house. The kindest thing anyone has done for me actually happened just the other day. I was explaining to one of my friends from a choir that, since I'm no longer working, I can't afford to sign up for the summer. She immediately offered to pay for my term and wouldn't take no for an answer. Before I could finish thanking her, she messaged me saying that she already signed me up and paid because that's what choir moms do. There was also the time 4 of my colleagues pooled their money and got me a massage. I am truly blessed. I reached out to dozens of people my dad has known and told me stories about throughout the years: cousins, relatives, co-workers, groomsmen, friends throughout his adult years, friends from childhood, and even from his recently deceased dad before he passed away. I asked them if they could share a memory or picture they had of him. I was overwhelmed by the responses. So many people wrote back, even people I had missed but had heard about it through the grapevine. It was so kind of those people to dig through their archives and spend the time to do that. I compiled them all into a box and gave it to him for his 60th birthday. My dad and the rest of our family all really enjoyed reading the letters and seeing long-lost photographs. What a great idea. With COVID-19, my mum's birthday party may be cancelled. I may do this instead, make a PowerPoint and have a video party for her. I broke my foot while bouldering a week into my semester abroad. I had never been out of the country before, so I was absolutely panicking. A total stranger came right over after I fell, recorded important info for the paramedics, and spent the next 10 or so minutes while waiting for the ambulance asking me questions about my studies and my research. I'd mentioned I was a student. He asked such thoughtful questions and was so kind and able to calm me down even though I was absolutely freaking out. It's kinda like that parable in the Bible. Some rich guys give a lot of money or whatever during the offering and a poor woman only gives 2 coins, and Jesus says she gave everything because it was all she had. An older gentleman tried to ship an envelope to his grandson from a shipping company I worked at. The way he acted and the things he said threw up too many red flags in my head. So against company policy, I opened the envelope after he left, and inside of it was 5 figures in cash. I called the cops and told them to get in touch with the man and try to figure out what was going on. As it turns out, someone had called the older man and said his grandson was in the hospital and if they didn't send the money he would get a surgery that was badly needed. The older man couldn't get in touch with the grandson by phone, so he panicked and sent the money to the address they provided. We were able to stop it from happening and get the money back to him. He said it was basically his life savings. The story kind of got big and the news ran a story on it, and apparently it's a scam that happens to a lot of old people. We started this kind of club to reach out to nursing homes and try and educate people about it, and a lot of people were not aware of anything like that happening. A lot of good came from me just being nosy. A friend of mine, educated and in her 60s, fell for one of these type scams. She was embarrassed but told everyone she could so others would learn from her mistake. I can very easily imagine Mum falling for some kind of scam before we put in a home. She was pretty talkative to anyone who called because she considered it rude to just hang up. It's scary. I donated stem cells to a stranger. I matched with them almost a year ago and the procedure was completed in December. It's a very impersonal experience because of the anonymity of it. I didn't know anything about the patient I was donating to and they knew nothing about me. It wasn't until I received a letter from her, this morning no less, that it really hit me how much of an impact it had on her life. For me it was a cheek swab I did in college 4 years ago and then a random email saying that I had matched with someone. It was eye-opening to read her letter because after the pandemic I hadn't really thought about it for a while. Of course, it was a profound experience donating life-saving stem cells to someone, but not knowing where those cells were going after the procedure left me feeling sort of empty. It wasn't until today that I really appreciated it. Edit, here is the link to the bone marrow registry in the US, or at least the one that I used. Be the match registry. How did you donate the cells? Really just a cheek swab? That's interesting. The donation was extensive. I had to take drugs to increase my stem cell count for 2 weeks before having those cells taken out of my body through a blood cycling machine called a hemosep. The cheek swab is used to find DNA matches between patients. I absolutely love doing adopt-a-families during Christmas. I don't have kids of my own but I really put a lot of thought into what to get them. These are low-income families, and I always ask for ones with lots of little kids, so I try to pick things that they can get a lot of use out of. I always get loads of books, especially ones where the parents can interact with the kids, cookbooks, puzzles, bedtime stories. I go heavy on science books and kits too, especially for girls. Always gotta get a hula hoop, one of those huge life-size dollhouse/castles you can color, and a ton of some sort of age-appropriate building blocks or Legos. I get piles of art stuff and paper, coloring books, painting sets, jewelry kits, all kinds of crafty things. I get them some sort of diary or journal if they're older, someplace secret they can write their thoughts. My most favorite family of them all was a single mom who just turned 18. Her son was 3 and she'd moved into her very first apartment. She had nothing but 2 bare mattresses on the floor, one for her and one for her son. She was working a job and was trying to save up for things for the house. Her wish list was heartbreaking. She wanted blankets for them both, a pan to cook with, and a Spider-Man toy for her son. That's it. I was single at the time, supporting myself, so I only had a couple hundred to spend. I got her a complete comforter/sheet set, a pillow, and a full set of cooking pans. I found the coolest thing for her son though. It was a fitted sheet that turned your bed into a Spider-Man tent. It was awesome. And then I found a big Spider-Man stuffed toy, like 2 feet tall. I also found this huge book with over 100 full-length bedtime stories. I got the usual boring stuff, clothes for her son, and a gift card for a holiday meal. But then I found at Target a clearance TV/DVD combo. It was less than $100. I knew money was tight, so I included a note in her Christmas card that she could rent her son videos from the library for free. I would have given anything to see their faces. I really hope she liked everything. I wish that it made a good Christmas for her and maybe made her first Christmas on her own a little happier. Damn, that's so freaking sad. Like the happy sad though, I may or may not have a tear. In 6th grade, it was 2 stops away from my stop. A man was just laying on the sidewalk. Our bus was stopped for a long time. I noticed the bus driver wasn't on the bus and I looked outside and the guy was just laying there. Our bus driver is really nice, so her being the nice lady she is, she rushes out of the bus, check his pulse and calls an ambulance. The bad part was some people on my bus were talking shite, saying I bet he overdosed on something, and almost after that my mom comes to pick me up. Turns out the next day our bus driver said the man from yesterday didn't overdose, he went into diabetic shock, or I think that's what she said, but she basically saved someone. That's awesome she did that. But you know, it doesn't matter if it was diabetic shock or an overdose, they still needed help and she did it. Yee, people are cruel sometimes. I have had people say leave him, it's just a drunk, when a dude toppled over on the bus and was literally lying there like a mannequin. Also, diabetic shock smells like booze, even if the person hasn't been drinking anything. That's why you always check and always put them into the safety position. You wouldn't want a person on your conscience, even drunk, because they barfed when lying on their back. I saw a neighbor boy practicing his jump shot into some tree branches in his front yard. I had a portable hoop in the back from when I moved in that was taking up space. So I walked over and offered him the hoop for free. I only lived there for the next year or two, but it was almost non-stop basketball dribble next door after that. I saw him, his sister, parents, aunts, uncles, even a grandparent or two all take a couple of shots at the hoop over time. It felt good to know his family got so much use out of it. Speaking of hoops, I lived for a while in a pretty expensive neighborhood with an apartment complex pretty close by. I had a hoop outside and several of the kids from the complex asked if they could shoot hoops in my driveway. Neighbors got pissed, but I said sure. Even brought them snacks sometimes. They never gave me any trouble and they didn't have a hoop, so I didn't see any issues in just being kind to someone else. The ball is life, man. I grew up poor and I remember sometimes going over to a classmate's house who had a hoop. He and his family always said I was welcome to use it whenever I was nearby. That was the whole reason I fell in love with basketball. Small gestures like that mean a whole lot to people who have very little. I was talking to some random guy in the bar, and he said he was having surgery the next day and didn't have someone to pick him up after. I ended up driving him there, sitting with him before he went back, calling his parents when he got out, sitting with him in recovery, picking up his post-op meds, driving him home, and making sure he was okay before I left. Never saw him again, and that's okay. Edit, or, thanks, guys. To answer a couple of questions, dude was just grabbing a bite to eat before his cutoff time. His girlfriend had just broken up and moved, and his backup fell through. Guy just needed a hand. It seemed like no big deal at the time. I've been reading through the whole thread, and this is the one that really got me. It's not easy to find someone to be this person when you need it, even if you have friends and family. That you did this for a stranger really touches me, and that you didn't become best buds afterward is nice too, because it shows the kind of person you are to a community. You saw a need and an opportunity to be kind, and you stepped up to it, even when it must have taken most of a day at least, and a considerable amount of responsibility on your part. I'm glad there are people like you out there. Something comes to mind that happened to me once. It was my first job in the field of conservation and my boss was a real hard ass, but secretly a kind man. I had a 6-month-old son and was a 20-year-old single mom. I had just found out some bad news and was really sinking financially. My son's dad was dipping in and out. I wasn't emotionally mature enough for a relationship at the time. I had too much on my plate. One thing after another. I was the only woman on a crew of 7 men, working to plant trees, fix USFS roads and restore habitats in the PNW for 10 hours a day. Too girly to relate to the guys, too manly for my girlfriends. Nobody understood. I felt hopeless. One day I cried on lunch break, it was all stacking up and I was cracking under pressure. After work the next day, as the other crew members filtered out of the work trucks, my boss said to me, "Just wait for a second." I was irritated because I thought he was going to ream me for my work performance, which he frequently did, for everyone. Instead, he waited until everyone was gone, pulled out his wallet and took a wad of cash out. He said, "I don't know how much is here, 'cause I just grabbed a handful. But I want you to take every dollar in my wallet and help get yourself out of that hole you're in." It's been almost a decade since then, and my life has been completely turned around. I'm deliriously happy now. That gruff, sour old Forrester made a big change in my life, and for much more than that moment. I'll always appreciate having the opportunity to know and work for him. Edit to add, thanks so much for the kind comments and awards, you guys are fantastic. I can't answer all comments but I'll try to answer what I can. I don't feel comfortable saying the amount he gave but it was more than $100 and less than $1,000. And yes, he absolutely got a letter last Christmas with pictures of my kids and my wedding, lots of details and thank yous for his amazing encouragement. I did go on to make a career of this, and I am very happy now. If you have the means and feel comfortable doing so, consider calling and telling him where you're at in life now. I'm not saying all the progress you've made is his doing, but even if it's been a decade I'm sure it would warm his heart to know you've truly pulled through. Background: my family and I were homeless when I was about to turn 13. My youngest brother is severely autistic. We were standing in line for lunch at the local soup kitchen, which opened at 11 a.m. We had arrived at 6 in the morning and were decently close to the door, only about 20 other people in front of us. My father had just returned from taking my youngest brother for yet another walk around the block, as he had begun fighting and stimming and biting himself in frustration. After another few minutes in line, it was clear that he had more than reached his tiny 9-year-old limit and had begun to lose it. There were a couple of guys who were dressed in ratty t-shirts, jean vests covered in patches, and plenty of veteran memorabilia, mostly from Vietnam. Think those little ribbons or the POW MIA patches. Each of them had either an old, dirty backpack or a trash bag which held all of their personal belongings in the world. One of the men, in a wheelchair and missing a leg, seeing my little brother's frustration and hearing my mother explain yet again that he had severe autism, rolled up to the 5 of us, 2 parents and 3 young kids, all sunburned from the Florida sun with no place to call home, and unhooked his one treasured possession. He had a little stuffed monkey that was hooked onto his steering portion of the wheelchair. It was the only clean thing about the man, or really anyone else in line. It had a little vest like his, a tiny jean jacket with a small POW patch on its back. He gave it to my little brother, and my little brother immediately hugged it and cuddled with it, calming down. I'll never forget his words, "He looks like he could use it more than me." It was his one and only real, treasured possession and he gave it to the little boy that was crying. Now, I'm in a position to give back. And I do whenever I can. If I have the opportunity, I help those who need it. But I don't think I could ever repay that single gesture, so I just try to live my life the best way I possibly can. Yes. I once heard the phrase, "I know it seems as though the $100 they gave you is better than my $10, but that was my last $10. It has stuck with me. It's the thoughtful things that matter. Thank you for watching. Tell me what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more. You are a legend.